Have you ever made sacrifices that no one acknowledged? Worked twice as hard because someone else got all the support? My name is Allison Carter, and 3 years ago, my parents took my entire college fund, $87,000 that my grandparents had, set aside specifically for my education, and handed it to my brother Mason for his tech startup. Their reason? It was a better investment. Today, I run the hiring committee at Helix Innovations, one of the fastest-growing tech companies in Boston. And guess who just submitted his application? That's right, my brother. The same brother whose failed startup swallowed my education money whole. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. This isn't a revenge story. It's about what happens when family, money, and careers collide in ways you never expect. I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, in a family that valued entrepreneurship above all else. My father, Richard Carter, owned a small but successful chain of hardware stores that he had built from the ground up. My mother, Jennifer, managed the books and handled the business side of things. They were the perfect team. Dad was the visionary. Mom was the practical one who made his visions reality. Then there was my older brother, Mason. From the time he could talk, Mason was the apple of my father's eye. At family dinners, Dad would say things like, "Mason's got the Carter business gene. You can see it in the way he thinks." And honestly, I couldn't disagree. My brother was charismatic, quick-thinking, and had this effortless way of making people believe in him. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one. I did well in school, particularly in math and computer science, but I wasn't outspoken about my achievements. I wasn't the type to burst into a room with a new business idea or talk about changing the world. I just worked hard and kept my head down. When I was 12, my maternal grandparents started a college fund for me. They had done the same for Mason, but he had chosen to attend a state school on a partial scholarship, using only a portion of his fund. My grandparents were old school. They believed education was the foundation of success, especially for women. "Education is the one thing no one can take from you," my grandmother would tell me. By the time I was ready to apply to colleges, there was $87,000 in that fund. It would have covered most of my tuition at MIT, where I'd been accepted to study computer science. I remember the day the acceptance letter came. I'd run into the kitchen waving it, and my mom had hugged me and said she was proud. Dad nodded from behind his newspaper and said, "That's nice, Allie." Standard response. But Mason? Mason had just launched his third business venture, a software platform called Nexus Link that was supposed to revolutionize how small businesses manage their supply chains. His first two ventures had fizzled out quickly, but everyone in the family believed the third time would be the charm. "3 strikes and you're in," my father would joke. One evening in April, about a month before my high school graduation, I came home to find my parents and Mason sitting at the dining room table with papers spread out in front of them. They looked up when I entered, and there was this strange tension in the air. "Allie, sit down," my mother said, her voice gentle but firm. "We need to discuss something important with you." I sat, and my father cleared his throat. "Mason's business is at a critical juncture," he explained. "He needs additional capital to secure his first major client and hire 2 key developers." I nodded, not understanding what this had to do with me. "We've looked at all our options," my mother continued, "and we've decided to invest in Nexus Link." "That's great," I said, still confused about why this required a family meeting. Then my father dropped the bomb. "We're going to use your college fund to make this investment." The words didn't make sense at first. My college fund? The money my grandparents had set aside specifically for my education? But "I'm going to MIT in the fall," I said, my voice small. "Plans change, Allie," my father replied, not quite meeting my eyes. "This is a family decision. Mason's business has real potential, It could set all of us up for life if it takes off. And what about my education? I asked, feeling my chest tighten. You can start at community college, my mother suggested, as if this was a perfectly reasonable alternative to MIT. Transfer later, maybe. Or there are student loans. After Nexus Link succeeds, I'll pay for your entire education, Mason added quickly. With interest. This is just temporary, Allie, I promise. I looked at my brother's earnest face, at my father's determined expression, at my mother's apologetic but resolute gaze. They had already decided. This wasn't a discussion. It was an announcement. Did you talk to Grandma and Grandpa about this? I asked. A flicker of discomfort crossed my mother's face. We'll explain it to them, she said. They'll understand that this is a family priority right now. They wouldn't understand. I knew they wouldn't. But I also knew, sitting there at that table, that I had lost this battle before it even began. The next morning, I called my grandparents myself. I couldn't let my parents deliver this news like it was something we had all agreed upon. The conversation was painful. My grandmother cried. My grandfather got quiet in that dangerous way of his. They can't do this, he said finally. That money was for your education, Allison, not for Richard's pet projects or Mason's business schemes. But legally they could. My parents were the custodians of the fund. While it had been intended for my education, there were no binding restrictions on how it could be used. 2 days later, my grandparents drove up from their retirement community in Delaware. I wasn't home for the conversation, but I could hear the raised voices from the driveway when I returned from my after-school job at the local tech repair shop. My grandfather's normally measured tone had risen to something I'd never heard before. That night, my mother came to my room. Her eyes were red-rimmed. Your grandparents have offered to pay for your first year at MIT directly, she said. But your father and I have decided that wouldn't be fair to Mason. We've made our decision, Allison. You'll need to defer your acceptance and start at Lancaster Community College in the fall. I didn't cry until after she left. I'm not sure why. Maybe some part of me had still been hoping they would change their minds, that someone would stand up for me. But no one did. The day after graduation, I packed what I could fit into my old Honda Civic, a hand-me-down from Mason when he'd upgraded to a newer model paid for by my parents, and drove to Boston. Not to attend MIT, but because I had a standing job offer from Teddy Kim, the owner of the tech repair shop where I'd worked for 3 years. Boston's full of opportunities for someone with your skills, Teddy had told me. My brother owns a similar shop there. He's always looking for good technicians, and you're the best I've ever trained. Teddy's brother Sam gave me a job and let me crash on his couch until I found a tiny studio apartment that I could barely afford. I enrolled in night classes at Bunker Hill Community College while working full-time at the repair shop. It wasn't MIT, but it was something. Meanwhile, Nexus Link was struggling to deliver on its promises. Mason had secured that first client with my college money, but the software wasn't working as advertised. The 2 developers he'd hired turned out to be less experienced than their resumes had suggested. 6 months in, the client pulled out. I knew all this because my mother would call weekly, ostensibly to check on me, but really to keep me updated on Mason's business. I think she felt guilty. She should have. It's just a setback, she assured me after the client pulled out. Your father is helping Mason rework the business plan. They're pivoting to focus on smaller businesses first. I didn't tell her about my 18-hour days, working at the repair shop, attending classes, then picking up freelance coding jobs that I found through online platforms. I didn't tell her that I was exhausted all the time, or that some nights I was so hungry I couldn't sleep because I'd had to choose between buying textbooks and buying groceries. My grandparents tried to help. They sent me care packages and occasional checks, but their own finances were limited. They'd already spent most of their savings on those college funds for Mason and me. A year into this new life, something unexpected happened. A customer brought in a high-end laptop with a complex issue that none of Sam's other technicians could figure out. I took one look at it and knew exactly what was wrong. A rare firmware conflict that I'd read about in one of my endless late-night study sessions. The customer, Elizabeth Winters, turned out to be the CTO of Helix Innovations, a mid-sized tech company that specialized in custom software solutions for healthcare providers. She was impressed enough with my diagnosis and repair of her laptop that she asked for my resume on the spot. "We're always looking for people who can solve problems others can't," she said, handing me her business card. "Even if you don't have a degree yet, talent is talent." I interviewed at Helix the following week. They offered me a position as a junior developer with a salary that made me sit down in shock. It was more money than I'd ever imagined making, especially without a degree. The position also came with tuition assistance for employees continuing their education. Within 6 months, I'd been promoted twice. It turned out that my combination of practical repair experience and theoretical knowledge from my community college courses gave me a unique perspective on software development problems. Elizabeth became my mentor, taking me under her wing and challenging me to keep growing. Back in Pennsylvania, NexusLink was on its last legs. The pivot hadn't worked. Smaller businesses weren't interested in a complex supply chain management system. They needed something simpler and less expensive. Mason was burning through what remained of my college fund, and my father had started pumping his own money into the failing venture. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. During one of our weekly calls, my mother finally admitted things weren't going well. "Your father had to take out a second mortgage on the house," she said, her voice tight with worry. "And 2 of the hardware stores aren't profitable anymore. He's considering selling them." I should have felt vindicated. Some part of me did, but mostly I felt sad. Not just for myself, but for all of us, caught in this web of poor decisions and misplaced faith. 2 years after I'd left home, NexusLink officially folded. Mason had burned through my entire college fund, plus an additional $120,000 from my parents. My father had to sell 3 of his 5 hardware stores to cover the second mortgage and business debts. My parents downsized from the home I'd grown, up into a small condo. Mason moved back home, supposedly to regroup and plan his next venture. But from what my mother told me, he mostly slept late and played video games. The golden child had lost his shine. By then, I was thriving at Helix. I'd been promoted to team lead and was nearly finished with my associate's degree. Elizabeth had encouraged me to apply to Northeastern University's part-time program to complete my bachelor's in computer science, which I could attend with Helix's generous tuition assistance. I'd moved into a nice 1-bedroom apartment and had even started dating again. A fellow developer named Ryan, who made me laugh and never made me feel less than for my unconventional path. It was around this time that Elizabeth approached me about joining the hiring committee. Helix was growing rapidly, and they needed people who could identify not just technical skills, but the kind of resilience and problem-solving ability that couldn't always be captured on a resume. "You've got a good eye for potential," Elizabeth told me. "You see past the credentials to what really matters." My first task on the hiring committee was to review a stack of applications for a new senior developer position. I was halfway through the pile when I saw it, a resume for Mason Carter. My brother had applied to my company without even telling me. The resume was full of exaggerations and outright lies. He claimed NexusLink had been acquired in a private sale, rather than admitting it had failed. He listed skills I knew for a fact he didn't possess, and he had used our father as a reference, describing him as a business advisor to multiple successful startups. I sat there staring at the document, a storm of emotions washing over me. Anger, disbelief, a twisted kind of amusement. And beneath it all, a question. What was I going to do about it? I closed Mason's application and stared out the window of my office. Boston's skyline glittered in the late afternoon sun, so different from the quiet streets of Lancaster where I'd grown up. 3 years had passed since that devastating night when my parents had announced their decision to give my college fund to Mason. 3 years of clawing my way up from nothing while he'd squandered every advantage. The next morning, I arrived at work early and went straight to Elizabeth's office. She was already there, coffee in hand, reviewing quarterly reports. "Got a minute?" I asked, hovering in her doorway. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "What's on your mind, Allison?" I handed her Mason's resume. "My brother applied for the senior developer position." Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. "I didn't know you had a brother in tech." "That's because most of what's on this resume is fiction," I said, then hesitated. "I need to recuse myself from this hiring decision, obviously, but I also feel obligated to tell you about the discrepancies." Elizabeth studied me for a moment, then set the resume aside. "Tell me the real story." So I did. I told her everything. The college fund, Nexus Link's failure, the family fallout. I tried to stay factual, but emotion crept into my voice despite my best efforts. When I finished, Elizabeth was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you for your honesty, Allison. Not everyone would have come forward like this. The easy thing would have been to quietly tank his application. The thought had crossed my mind, I'll admit. I'll handle this myself," Elizabeth continued. "And yes, you're officially recused from the process. Whatever happens with your brother's application, it won't involve you directly." I nodded, relieved. "Thank you." As I turned to leave, Elizabeth added, "You know, I've always wondered what drove you so hard. Now I understand." I spent the rest of the day distracted, wondering what Elizabeth would do. Would she discard Mason's application outright? Give him a courtesy interview? I almost called my mother that evening to ask if she knew Mason had applied, but stopped myself. This was between my brother and me now. 2 days later, my phone rang. Mason's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Hello? You couldn't just let me have this, could you?" His voice was tight with anger. So Elizabeth had contacted him. "What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Allie. Your boss called me in for an interview today, then spent the entire time picking apart my resume. She knew things only you could have told her." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. "You lied on your application, Mason. Did you think no one would check?" Everyone embellishes their resume. That's how the game is played. Claiming your failed company was acquired isn't embellishment. It's a fraud. He made a dismissive sound. "Always so black and white with you. This was my chance to get back on my feet, and you ruined it." "I recuse myself," I said quietly. "Whatever Elizabeth decided, it was based on your qualifications. Not my input." "Bullshit. You've always been jealous of me, Allie. Always resented that Mom and Dad believed in me." The unfairness of his accusation stole my breath. "They gave you my future, Mason. My money. My chance. And I would have paid you back tenfold if you'd just been patient. Nexus Link could have changed everything if what? If you'd had more of my money to burn through? If Dad had sold the rest of his stores to fund your delusions?" The line went quiet, and for a moment I thought he'd hung up. Then he said, his voice cold, "Mom and Dad are right about you. You've changed. It will be hard. Unforgiving." So they'd been talking about me? Of course they had. Maybe I have changed, I admitted. But I'm not the one asking for handouts anymore. After we hung up, I sat on my apartment floor, shaking. 3 years of suppressed anger and hurt threatened to overwhelm me. I called Ryan, who came over immediately. He held me while I finally allowed myself to cry for everything I'd lost. Not just the money, but the family relationships that would never be the same. The next morning, Elizabeth stopped by my desk. "Got time for coffee?" We walked to the small cafe on the corner. Once we had our drinks, she got straight to the point. Your brother won't be joining Helix. I nodded, unsurprised. Not because of your relationship, she clarified, but because he lacks the technical skills and experience for the position, and because he was dishonest on his application. I understand. She stirred her coffee thoughtfully. He reminds me of my ex-husband. Charming, persuasive, convinced of his own brilliance despite all evidence to the contrary. That was Mason in a nutshell. But that's not why I wanted to talk to you, Elizabeth continued. I wanted to discuss your future here at Helix. My heart sank. Had my family drama somehow compromised my position? We're creating a new department focused on secure healthcare applications, and I want you to lead it. I nearly choked on my coffee. Lead it? I don't even have my bachelor's degree yet. Elizabeth waved this off. You'll finish it within the year, and frankly, what you've accomplished without that piece of paper is more impressive than what most people do with it. She leaned forward. This promotion comes with a significant salary increase. Enough that you could finish your degree at MIT instead of Northeastern, if you wanted. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. The opportunity I'd been denied was circling back around, not handed to me this time, but earned through my own efforts. Think about it, Elizabeth said, rising from her chair. We'll talk about the details next week. That evening, I called my grandparents. My grandmother answered, her voice brightening when she realized it was me. We chatted about her garden and my grandfather's new woodworking hobby before I shared my news. Elizabeth offered me a department head position, I said. And with the salary, I could transfer to MIT to finish my degree. My grandmother's delighted cry brought my grandfather to the phone. That's my girl, he said, his voice gruff with emotion. Always knew you'd find your way there eventually. I was thinking, I said hesitantly, maybe you two could come up for a visit. I could show you around Boston and maybe we could tour the MIT campus together. There was a pause. Then my grandfather cleared his throat. We'd like that very much, Allison. After we hung up, I felt lighter than I had in years. I hadn't realized how much I needed their approval, their presence in my life again. The following weekend, my phone rang with my mother's weekly call. She started with her usual small talk, but I could tell something was wrong. Her voice had that forced cheerfulness that always masked trouble. What's going on, Mom? I finally asked. She sighed. Your father's not doing well, honey. The stress of everything, the business troubles, the mortgage. His blood pressure is through the roof. The doctor wants him to take time off, but he says he can't afford to. A complicated knot of emotions twisted in my chest. Concern for my father's health, lingering resentment over his choices, guilt at my own success while they struggled. And Mason? I asked. Another sigh. He's been upset since that interview at your company didn't pan out. He feels you sabotaged him. Of course he did. I recused myself, Mom. I wasn't involved in the decision. I know, honey. But you know how Mason is when things don't go his way. He needs someone to blame. And I'd always been the convenient target. Some things never changed. He's talking about moving to Austin, she continued. Says there's more opportunity for entrepreneurs. There? With what money? I wanted to ask, but didn't. I already knew the answer. They would scrape together whatever they could to send him off with a stake, even as my father's health deteriorated under the strain. After the call, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, thinking about the cycles we get trapped in. My parents would never stop enabling Mason. He would never stop expecting it. And I would always be the practical one expected to understand, to forgive, to move on without the support they lavished on him. But I wasn't that girl anymore, the one who swallowed her disappointment and accepted whatever scraps of attention and resources fell her way. I had built something for myself. I had people in my corner now who valued me for exactly who I was. The next day, I made a decision. I called my father directly, something I rarely did. Allie? He sounded surprised. Everything okay? I heard about your health issues, I said, and I want to help. Silence on the line. My father had never been good at accepting help, especially from his children. Especially from me? I'm doing fine, he said stiffly. Your mother shouldn't have worried you. Dad, please. I have a good job now. A really good job. I can help with the medical bills or... We don't need handouts, Allison. His pride, always. His pride. It's not a handout. It's family taking care of family. The irony of using his own justification from 3 years ago wasn't lost on me. Isn't that what you told me when you took my college fund? That family priorities come first? He inhaled sharply. We had never directly discussed what happened, not once in 3 years. That was different, he said finally. How? How was it different, Dad? Mason needed that investment to get his business off the ground. This is just throwing money at a problem. I closed my eyes, counted to 10. The problem is your health, Dad, and the financial stress makes it worse. I can help with both. Please let me. The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. Then, finally, let me talk to your mother about it. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't an outright rejection either. Progress. That night, I had dinner with Ryan at his place. As we washed dishes side by side, I told him about my conversation with my father. You're a better person than I would be, he said, handing me a plate to dry. After what they did, I'm not sure I could bring myself to help them. I considered this as I placed the dry plate in the cabinet. It's not about being better. It's about breaking the cycle. I took another dish from him. They've always had this dynamic. Dad the dreamer, Mom the enabler, Mason the golden child, and me the afterthought. If I want things to change, I have to change my part in it first. Ryan bumped his shoulder against mine affectionately. When did you get so wise? Somewhere between having my future stolen and building a new one, I guess. The next morning, I received an email that made my heart race. An offer letter for the department head position, with a salary that made my previous impressive pay seem modest by comparison. I immediately forwarded it to Elizabeth with one word. Yes. Her reply came minutes later. Smart choice. Let's have lunch to discuss your first project. Over sushi, Elizabeth laid out her vision for the new department, creating secure, intuitive software for smaller healthcare providers who couldn't afford the bloated systems designed for major hospitals. The irony isn't lost on me, I said, picking up a piece of salmon sashimi. What's that? My brother's company was supposed to create simplified software for small businesses. It failed because he didn't actually understand what they needed. I shook my head. And now here I am, building exactly that kind of solution, but for healthcare instead of supply chains. Elizabeth smiled. The difference is, you'll succeed where he failed because you understand the value of starting small and building on solid foundations, no shortcuts. After lunch, I called Northeastern to discuss transferring my credits to MIT. The process would be complicated but doable. I'd lose some credits in the transition, which meant my graduation would be delayed by a semester, but it felt worth it to finish what I'd started. Or rather, what I'd been prevented from starting 3 years ago. That evening, I received a text from my mother. Your father and I talked. He's willing to accept your help with the medical bills. Thank you, Allie. Progress, indeed. The following weekend, my grandparents arrived for their visit. Seeing their faces at the airport, my grandmother's tearful smile, my grandfather's proud stance, something broken inside me began to heal. They had always believed in me, even when my parents didn't. Their faith had never wavered. I showed them my apartment, my office at Helix, my favorite spots around Boston. And finally, on Sunday afternoon, we walked the MIT campus together. Standing In the main quad, my grandmother squeezed my hand. "You belong here," she said softly. "You always did." My grandfather nodded, looking around at the historic buildings, the students hurrying between classes. "Better late than never," he said, which from him was practically a poetic speech. As we walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a text. From an unknown number. I glanced down and froze. "Got a new phone. Thinking about what you said. Can we talk? Mason." I stared at the message, a complex swirl of emotions rising in my chest. After everything, after all this time, my brother was reaching out. Not with accusations or demands, but with what seemed like an olive branch? My grandmother noticed my expression. "Everything all right, dear?" I slipped the phone back into my pocket. Decision made. "Just work," I said. "Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow." Whatever Mason wanted, whatever new chapter might be beginning, it could wait one more day. This moment, walking across the MIT campus with the two people who had always believed in me, deserved my full attention. The past, with all its pain and complications, would still be there tomorrow. But right now, I was exactly where I needed to be, moving forward on my own terms. The next morning, I stared at Mason's text for a full 5 minutes before responding. "Coffee at Blackbird Cafe, 6 p.m.? Neutral territory seemed important for whatever this conversation would be. His reply came quickly. "I'll be there." I spent the day distracted, oscillating between hope and skepticism. Mason had never been one to admit fault or seek reconciliation. What did he want now? Had our parents put him up to this? At 5:45, I claimed a corner table at Blackbird, a cozy spot far enough from my apartment and office that I wouldn't risk running into colleagues or neighbors. I ordered a cappuccino and waited, checking my watch every few minutes. Came and went, then 6:15. By 6:30, I was ready to leave, the familiar disappointment settling in my chest. Some things never changed. But then the door opened, and there he was. Mason looked different, thinner, with shadows under his eyes I'd never seen before. His usual confident stride was gone, replaced by a hesitant approach to my table. "Sorry I'm late," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Took the wrong train." I nodded, waiting as he ordered a black coffee. "So," I said after the barista left, "you wanted to talk." Mason ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. "Yeah. First, I wanted to apologize for how I reacted after the interview. Blaming you wasn't fair." The apology caught me off guard. Mason never apologized, not even when we were kids. "What changed?" I asked, studying his face. "A lot." He stared into his coffee. "After our call, I did some soul searching. Or maybe it was just finally hitting rock bottom." I raised an eyebrow, waiting. I confronted Mom and Dad about the Austin plan. Told them I couldn't take their money anymore. That it wasn't right. He glanced up at me. Should have seen their faces, like I'd started speaking in tongues. Despite everything, I felt a small smile tug at my lips. I could picture it perfectly, my parents' bewilderment at Mason's sudden attack of conscience. What prompted this revelation? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. "Your boss, actually." "Elizabeth?" Mason nodded. "During that interview, she didn't just call me out on the lies. She asked me some hard questions about my pattern of behavior, about using other people's resources instead of building something myself." He swallowed. It was like being dissected alive. I could imagine Elizabeth's calculated precision, her ability to see through people's facades. "Anyway," he continued, "she suggested I take stock of what I'm actually good at versus what I want to be good at. Said there's no shame in admitting entrepreneurship isn't my strength." "Sounds like Elizabeth," I murmured. "She also said something else." Mason hesitated. that I was lucky to have a sister who'd recused herself instead of sabotaging me outright. Given what I'd cost you, I'd never considered that Elizabeth might use the interview to deliver her own form of justice on my behalf. The thought was both unsettling and touching. "So what now?" I asked. "What are you going to do?" "I've applied to a coding boot camp," he said, surprising me again. "Figured I should actually learn the skills I claim to have on that resume." "A boot camp? That's unexpected." "I know, right?" He laughed without humor. "Mason Carter, starting. From scratch at 30, Dad's thrilled, as you can imagine. Our father's disappointment would be crushing. The golden child finally admitted he needed fundamentals, not just vision and charisma. And after the boot camp? Honestly, I don't know. Get an entry-level job somewhere. Build actual experience." He met my eyes directly. "I know it's what you had to do when I took your chance. Start at the bottom." The acknowledgement hung between us, neither accusation nor absolution, just a simple truth finally spoken aloud. "There's something else," he said, reaching into his pocket. He slid an envelope across the table. "It's not everything, not even close, but it's a start." I opened it to find a check for $12,000. "I sold my car," he explained. "Got a decent price for it. I know it doesn't make up for the college fund, but you sold your car." This was the most tangible evidence yet of his transformation. Mason loved that car, a luxury sedan our parents had helped him finance when Nexus Link seemed promising. He shrugged. "Don't need it in Boston. Transit's good enough." "You're staying in Boston?" The surprises kept coming. "The boot camp's here." A slight hesitation. "And I thought maybe we could try to rebuild things, if you're willing." I stared at him. At this version of my brother I'd never seen before. Humble, contrite, making actual sacrifices. Part of me wanted to reject the check, to tell him it was too little, too late. But another part recognized what this represented. Not just money, but the first step toward restitution. "I'm not sure what to say," I admitted. "You don't have to say anything right now." He stood, leaving his coffee half-finished. "Think about it. The check's yours either way. Use it or tear it up. Your choice." He slid a card across the table. "My new number and email. Ball's in your court, Allie." After he left, I sat there holding the check, turning it over in my hands. $12,000. A fraction of what I'd lost, but more than I'd ever expected to see repaid. What was I supposed to do with this gesture? The next morning at work, I sought out Elizabeth. Her door was open, but I knocked anyway. "Got a minute?" She motioned me in. "How was your weekend? Your grandparents enjoy their visit?" "They did, thanks." I settled into the chair across from her desk. "I had an interesting meeting yesterday, with my brother." Elizabeth's expression revealed nothing. "Oh?" "He said you gave him some advice during his interview, about recognizing his actual strengths and weaknesses." She nodded slowly. "I might have offered some perspective." "He also said you told him he was lucky I didn't sabotage him, given what he'd cost me." At this, a small smile tugged at her lips. "Did I overstep?" I considered the question. "No, but I'm curious why you did it." Elizabeth leaned back in her chair, studying me. "Do you know why I hired you 3 years ago, Allison?" The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. "Because I fixed your laptop? Because you solved a problem everyone else gave up on? But more than that, because when I asked about your background, you were honest about what you knew and what you didn't. No exaggeration, no bluster." She tapped her desk thoughtfully. "In my experience, people fall into 2 categories. Those who build things and those who take credit for things others build. Your brother struck me as the latter." "And you told him that?" I suggested he might find more success focusing on actual skills development rather than branding himself as an entrepreneur. Her gaze was steady. "I also told him he had caused real harm to someone who hadn't deserved it. I wasn't sure how. to feel about Elizabeth fighting this battle for me, however subtly. He gave me a check yesterday, I said. Said he sold his car to start paying me back. Her eyebrows rose slightly, the most surprise she ever showed. That's unexpected. He's also staying in Boston for a coding boot camp. I want to rebuild things between us. Elizabeth considered this. People can change, Allison. It's rare, but it happens. How do I know if it's genuine? Time will tell. Words are easy. Consistent actions over months or years, that's the test. She leaned forward. The question is whether you're willing to give him the chance to prove himself. That was precisely the question I'd been wrestling with all night. Enough about my family drama, I said, straightening. I need to focus on the new department. When can I start interviewing team members? Elizabeth allowed the subject change with a subtle nod. HR is finalizing your paperwork this week. You can start building your team next Monday. Later that day, I deposited Mason's check. Not because I needed the money, my new position at Helix made that a non-issue, but because rejecting it would close a door I wasn't sure I wanted closed yet. Accepting it was accepting the possibility of change, however slim. That evening, Ryan came over with takeout Thai food. As we ate on my small balcony, I told him about Mason's visit. Do you believe him? Ryan asked, expertly wielding his chopsticks. About wanting to change? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to. Another part is waiting for the catch. What would convince you it's genuine? I thought about this, watching the sunset paint Boston's skyline in shades of gold and pink. Consistency, I guess. Anyone can talk about change in a moment of crisis. Actually, changing requires sustained effort. Ryan nodded. So give it time. See if his actions match his words. Meanwhile, I need to decide how much to let him back into my life. Start small, Ryan suggested. Coffee once a month. See how it goes. He gave me a sidelong glance. And maybe bring back the first few times. I laughed. Volunteering to run interference? Always. He reached across the small table, taking my hand. Whatever you decide, I'm in your corner. The warmth of his support settled around me like a blanket. This was something I'd never had in Lancaster. Someone who was unquestionably on my side, with no divided loyalties or complicated history. The next weekend, I began the process of transferring to MIT. The admissions office still had my original application on file, which simplified things. My work experience at Helix and my community college performance strengthened my case for readmission. By the end of the meeting, it seemed likely I'd be able to start classes in the fall semester. As I walked across campus afterward, I called my grandparents to share the news. That's wonderful, honey, my grandmother said, her voice warm with pride. I told you it would all work out eventually. Better than working out, my grandfather chimed in. You'll be going there with real-world experience and a leadership position already secured. Makes those kids coming straight from high school look like amateurs. His fierce pride made me smile. It's been a long road. The scenic route has better views, he replied, which made me laugh. My taciturn grandfather had apparently developed a philosophical streak in his retirement. After we hung up, I sent a brief text to Mason. Coffee next Saturday? Same place, 11 a.m. His reply came almost instantly. I'll be there. On time, I promise. The following week flew by as I immersed myself in building my new department. I interviewed candidates, reviewed project proposals, and worked with Elizabeth to define our priorities for the first quarter. The work was challenging and exciting in equal measure. Exactly what I'd always wanted but never thought I'd achieve without a degree from a prestigious university. By the time Saturday rolled around, I was both exhausted and exhilarated. The foundation of my career was solidly in place, my education path was back on track, and even my complicated family situation seemed to be evolving in a positive direction. Mason was already at Blackbird when I arrived. precisely at 11 a.m. He'd claimed the same corner table and had 2 coffees waiting. "Wasn't sure how you take it," he said, gesturing to the array of sugars and creamers he'd gathered. "Black is fine." I settled across from him. "Thanks." He nodded, visibly nervous. "So, how was your week?" We eased into conversation about work, my new department, his preparations for the boot camp that would start in 2 weeks. He asked thoughtful questions about Helix and listened attentively to my answers. No one-upmanship, no steering the conversation back to his own projects. This alone marked a significant shift. "Have you talked to Mom and Dad this week?" I finally asked. His expression clouded slightly. "Yeah, Dad's still processing my career change. Mom's being supportive, at least outwardly." "And your move to Boston?" "They think I'm making a mistake, that I should come home, regroup, try another startup with their support." He shook his head. "They don't get that the problem isn't location or opportunity. It's me. I need to build actual skills before I try to lead anything again." The self-awareness was startling. "What changed, Mason?" "Really?" He considered the question carefully. "Remember when we were kids and Dad would take us to the hardware store on Saturdays? You'd ask all these questions about how things worked, the cash register, the inventory system, the pricing codes. But I just wanted to play manager, bossing around imaginary employees." I nodded, surprised he remembered those days. "I never outgrew that, Allie. I wanted to be the idea guy, the visionary, without doing the work to understand how things actually function." He traced the rim of his coffee cup. "When Nexus Link failed, I blamed everyone but myself. The developers, the market, the timing. But the truth is, I didn't know what I was doing. I couldn't even evaluate if the people I hired were competent because I didn't understand the work myself." That's insightful. It took losing everything to see it. And then seeing you, how you built your career step by step, learning the fundamentals before moving up. He met my eyes. "I resented you for that, for succeeding where I failed. It was easier to be angry than to admit you'd chosen the right path all along." The honesty between us felt fragile, precious. For the first time in our adult lives, we were having a real conversation, not performing the roles we'd been assigned in our family's dynamic. "I'm sorry for what happened with your college fund," he said quietly. "I should have refused it, or at least fought harder to make sure you got to go to MIT anyway." "Why didn't you?" "Because I believed my own hype. Thought Nexus Link would be a massive success within months, and I'd be able to pay for your education and more." He grimaced. "Classic Mason, right? All confidence, no substance." "And now?" "Now I'm trying to reverse that equation. Less talk, more action." He hesitated, then added, "I know one coffee can't fix everything, but I'm hoping it might be a start." I studied my brother, this new version who seemed capable of reflection and remorse. Was it real? Would it last? Only time would tell. "A start," I agreed cautiously. "Small steps." Relief washed over his face. "That's all I'm asking for. A chance to prove things can be different." As we finished our coffees, I realized something had shifted inside me. The bitter knot of resentment I'd carried for 3 years hadn't dissolved completely, but it had loosened its grip on my heart. Whether Mason's transformation proved lasting or not, I was no longer defined by what had been taken from me. I had built something new, a career, a support system, a path forward. Not despite the obstacles, but perhaps because of them. The detour had forced me to develop strengths and resilience I might never have discovered on the direct route. "Same time next week?" Mason asked as we stood to leave. I nodded. "Same time." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was an opening, a willingness to see if something new could grow in the space between who we had been and who we might become. As I walked home through Boston's busy streets, I felt lighter than I had in years. The future stretched before me, full of possibilities I'd earned through my own efforts. Whatever happened with Mason, with my parents, with the complicated tangle of our shared past, one thing was certain. I was exactly where I was meant to be, building a life on my own terms. And that perhaps was the most satisfying victory of all. The seasons changed. Summer faded into fall, and with it came my first semester at MIT as a part-time student. Walking into my first class, Advanced Algorithms, felt surreal, like stepping into an alternate timeline where the last 3 years had never happened. The campus buzzed with energy as students hurried between buildings, laptops tucked under their arms, animated conversations about quantum computing and artificial intelligence floating in the air. At 25, I was older than most of my classmates, with real-world experience they couldn't match. It put their theoretical knowledge into perspective, helping me see both its value and its limitations. "Ms. Carter?" The professor approached us after our first session. "Your application was quite unusual. Not many department heads at established tech companies return to complete their undergraduate degrees." "Better late than never," I replied with a smile. He nodded thoughtfully. "Your perspective will be valuable in class discussions. The gap between academic theory and industry practice is something students should understand." That gap became apparent in group projects. My classmates could solve complex algorithmic problems with elegant mathematical precision, but often struggled to explain how their solutions would function in real-world systems with actual users, constraints, and edge cases. "But it works perfectly in the test environment," a frustrated classmate named Darius protested when I pointed out flaws in his elegant but impractical solution. "The test environment isn't reality," I explained. "In the real world, users do unexpected things. Systems have resource constraints, and code has to be maintainable by people who aren't you." These conversations made me realize how much I'd learned during my unconventional path. The theoretical foundation I was gaining at MIT was crucial, but so was the practical wisdom I'd accumulated through necessity and experience. Meanwhile, my weekly coffees with Mason continued. True to his word, he had started the coding boot camp and was throwing himself into learning with an intensity I'd never seen from him before. "It's humbling," he admitted during one of our meetings, dark circles under his eyes from late nights spent debugging practice projects. "I always thought I was naturally smart, but this, actually building things from scratch, it's exposing all the gaps in my understanding." "That's how learning works," I said. "If it were easy, everyone would do it." He laughed tiredly. "That's what our instructor says, right before assigning another impossible project." "Are you thinking of quitting?" I asked, watching him carefully. "Hell no." The determination in his voice surprised me. "I'm not giving up this time, even if I have to repeat the entire course." Each week he brought his laptop to show me what he was working on. Simple apps at first, then increasingly complex projects as his skills developed. I offered suggestions, pointed out bugs, and recommended resources. There was something rewarding about helping him learn, about seeing actual growth instead of just talk and promises. 3 months into our new routine, he handed me another envelope across the table. "What's this?" I asked, though I had a suspicion. "Another installment," he said. $5,000 this time. I've been doing some freelance work on the side, building simple websites for small businesses. It's not much, but it's honest work." I started to protest. My salary at Helix made these payments unnecessary, but stopped myself. This wasn't about the money. It was about accountability, about Mason taking responsibility for his actions in a tangible way. "Thank you," I said instead, tucking the envelope into my bag. As Mason's boot camp neared its end, our conversations shifted to his job prospects. The program had a decent placement rate, but the market was competitive. "I could put in a good word at Helix," I offered one day, surprising myself almost as much as him. His eyebrows shot up. "Seriously? After what happened last time?" "Different circumstances. You'd be applying for a junior position with actual skills to back up your resume. I stirred my coffee. And you'd be working in a different department, obviously. Obviously, he agreed quickly. I wouldn't want to complicate things for you. I'd just be making an introduction. You'd have to get through the technical interviews on your own merit. He nodded, considering. I appreciate the offer, but I think I need to do this independently. Prove I can land a position without family connections. His refusal surprised me. The old Mason would have jumped at any advantage. But this Mason seemed determined to build something legitimate, even if it meant a harder path. I respect that, I said, and meant it. 2 weeks before Christmas, my parents called. They rarely reached out directly. Our communication usually filtered through my mother's weekly check-ins. We're thinking of coming to Boston for the holidays, my mother said after the usual pleasantries. To see you and Mason, if that's all right. The request caught me off guard. In 3 years, they had never suggested visiting me in Boston. When Mason moved here, though, suddenly a trip seemed worthwhile. It's fine, I said, trying to keep the edge from my voice. I'm busy with work and school, but we could have dinner. We'd like to see where you live, my father chimed in, and your office at Helix if that's possible. Now that was unexpected. My father had never shown interest in my career. I could arrange a tour, I said cautiously. That would be nice, he replied, an awkward silence following. After we hung up, I called Mason. Did you know about this? About what? Mom and Dad want to visit for Christmas, see where we live, tour my office. Huh. He sounded genuinely surprised. That's new. You didn't suggest it? No. Haven't spoken to them in almost 2 weeks, actually. Things got tense after I declined Dad's offer to finance another startup when the boot camp ended. This was news to me. He offered to finance another venture after everything that happened? Yep. Said he's been saving up to get me back on my feet properly. I told him I'm done with that path for now. Want to build skills and experience first. Mason sighed. He didn't take it well. Said I was wasting my potential as some code monkey instead of being a true entrepreneur like him. The familiar dynamic made my stomach knot. Our father's fixation on entrepreneurship as the only worthy path had shaped both our lives, pushing Mason into ventures he wasn't prepared for, and dismissing my more methodical approach. Maybe seeing your success firsthand will change his perspective, Mason suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. Maybe, I echoed, equally doubtful. When my parents arrived the week before Christmas, the city was decked in holiday lights. Fresh snow dusted the sidewalks, giving Boston a postcard-perfect appearance that belied my internal tension about their visit. I met them at their hotel for dinner the first night. My mother embraced me warmly, while my father offered an awkward half-hug. They both looked older than I remembered. My mother's hair now mostly gray, my father thinner, the lines around his eyes deeper. The city agrees with you, my mother said, studying me over her menu. You look well, Allie. Work and school are going well, I acknowledged. It's a good balance. MIT, my father said, the name heavy with unspoken history. Never thought you'd end up there after all. I met his gaze steadily. Life takes unexpected turns. Indeed it does. Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or simple acknowledgement. Your brother tells us you're a department head now. At your age, that's impressive. The compliment, however grudging, was unprecedented. Thank you. Dinner proceeded with careful conversation. They asked about my classes, my role at Helix, my apartment. I answered honestly but briefly, uncertain what they really wanted from this visit. The next day, I gave them a tour of Helix as promised. Elizabeth met us briefly, shaking their hands with professional courtesy but watching them with the same assessing gaze she used on potential clients. I wondered what she saw, what conclusions she drew about the people who had shaped me, for better and worse. Your boss seems formidable, my mother commented afterward. She is, I agreed. She's also the best mentor I could have asked for. My father was quiet as we walked through the development floor, where teams collaborated on projects displayed on large screens. Only when we reached my office, modest but with a beautiful view of the harbor, did he finally speak. You've built something solid here, he said, his voice gruff. Something real. Coming from him, this was high praise indeed. I wasn't sure how to respond, so I simply nodded. That evening, Mason joined us for dinner at a restaurant near the harbor. He arrived looking professional in slacks and a button-down shirt, his hair neatly trimmed, a far cry from the disheveled aspiring entrepreneur of years past. My parents' reaction to him was telling. My mother embraced him with the same warmth she'd shown me, but my father's greeting was reserved, almost cautious. The golden child's fall from grace had created a distance neither seemed to know how to bridge. Over appetizers, Mason shared news he hadn't even told me yet. I got a job offer today, he announced. Junior developer at MedTech Solutions. It's entry-level, but the company has a good reputation and strong growth potential. That's wonderful, honey, my mother exclaimed. My father's reaction was more measured. Junior developer, he repeated, the word sounding foreign on his tongue. What's the salary like? Dad, I interjected. That's not really… It's okay. Allie, Mason said with a small smile. It's a fair question. He turned to our father. The base salary is modest by industry standards, but there's a strong benefits package and clear advancement paths. Most importantly, I'll be learning from experienced developers while contributing to actual products. My father frowned slightly. But what's the timeline for moving up? Surely you don't intend to remain at entry level for long. I intend to become genuinely skilled before seeking advancement, Mason replied evenly. That takes time. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. In one simple exchange, the fundamental difference in worldviews was laid bare. My father's emphasis on rapid advancement versus the patient skill-building approach Mason and I had both embraced, albeit at different points in our lives. My mother, ever the peacemaker, quickly changed the subject. Tell us about your apartment, Mason. Is it near Allie's? The conversation shifted to safer topics, but the underlying tension remained. After dinner, as we waited for the valet to bring their car, my father pulled me aside. I need to ask you something, he said, his voice low. Your brother, this new direction of his, do you think it's right for him? The question surprised me. I think it's what he needs right now. But is it what he's meant for? He has vision, creativity. Seems a waste to have him debugging code for someone else's company. I studied my father's face, seeing not just disappointment, but genuine concern. In his own way, he wanted what was best for Mason. He just couldn't see that his definition of best had caused so much damage. Dad, Mason needs to build a foundation. Learn how things actually work from the ground up. Maybe someday he'll lead again, but from a place of knowledge and experience, not just ideas and charisma. My father frowned, unconvinced. Your grandfather built his construction business from nothing, without any fancy degrees or corporate experience. I built the hardware stores the same way. It's in our blood. Different times, different industries. I touched his arm gently. The tech world requires different skills. Mason is finally acknowledging that and doing the work. And you? He asked, his gaze sharp. Are you doing what you're meant for? Or are you still punishing us for what happened? The accusation stung. This isn't about punishment. I love my work at Helix. I'm good at it. And completing my degree at MIT is fulfilling a dream, not settling a score. He searched my face, looking for something. Validation, perhaps, or absolution. Your mother and I made a mistake. With the college fund. I see that now. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from him. Yes, you did. If we could go back? We can't, I said simply, but we can go forward differently. The valet arrived with their car, ending our conversation. As they prepared to leave, my mother hugged me tightly. We're proud of you, Allie, she whispered, both of you, for finding your paths, even if they weren't the ones we would have chosen. My father's goodbye was briefer, more reserved, but there was something new in his eyes as he shook my hand, a respect that hadn't been there before. After they drove away, Mason and I walked in silence for a while, snow crunching beneath our boots. So, he said finally. That was interesting. That's one word for it. I glanced at him. Congratulations on the job offer. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Just got the call this afternoon. Was going to tell you tomorrow at coffee. He grinned. But I couldn't resist dropping it at dinner. Did you see Dad's face? I laughed despite myself. Like you'd announced you were joining the circus. Being a code monkey is practically the same thing in his eyes. Mason's smile faded. He offered to fund another startup again last night. Said he'd remortgaged his condo to raise capital. My stomach dropped. Please tell me you refused. Of course I did. Told him to invest it in his retirement instead. He kicked at a pile of snow. He thinks I'm settling for less than I'm worth. Doesn't understand that I need to earn my place this time. We walked a bit further, the city quiet under its blanket of snow. What do you think they really wanted from this visit? I asked finally. Mason considered the question. Reassurance, maybe. That we're okay despite their mistakes. Or reconciliation on their terms, without having to actually acknowledge what happened. And are we? Okay, I mean, getting there. He bumped his shoulder against mine lightly. One coffee at a time. As we reached the intersection where we'd part ways, Mason turned to face me. I know tomorrow's our usual coffee, but I have a second interview in that time slot. Rain check till Sunday? Sure. I hesitated, then added, I'm proud of you, you know, for doing the work. Something flashed in his eyes. Surprise, gratitude, a hint of the old insecurity. Coming from you, that means a lot. We parted ways, each, heading to our separate apartments in different corners of the city. As I walked, snow began to fall again, fresh flakes erasing old footprints. It seemed fitting somehow, a clean slate, a new beginning. The path ahead wouldn't be perfect. My parents would likely never fully understand the consequences of their choices. Mason's transformation would face more tests as he navigated his new career, and I would continue balancing work, school, and the complex process of redefined family relationships. But for the first time in years, all of us were moving forward with clearer vision, seeing each other not as fixed characters, in an old family drama, but as people capable of growth and change. People who could perhaps write a different story going forward than the one that had brought us here. That night, I stood at my apartment window watching snow transform the city into something new and beautiful. In 3 years, I had lost a dream and found a different one, lost a family dynamic and built a new one, lost my planned path and forged an unexpected one that had led me exactly where I needed to be, not despite what had been taken from me, but because of it. And in that realization was a kind of freedom I hadn't known I was seeking. Spring arrived in Boston with a burst of color and activity. Cherry blossoms lined Commonwealth Avenue, students sprawled across the MIT campus lawns, and the city seemed to exhale after the long winter. I was thriving in my dual roles as department head and student, finding unexpected synergies between the theoretical concepts in my classes and the practical challenges at Helix. One particularly, busy Tuesday, Elizabeth stopped by my office with news that would shift my path yet again. We're expanding, she announced without preamble, settling into the chair across from my desk. Opening a West Coast office in San Francisco. The healthcare tech scene there is booming, and we need to establish a presence. I nodded, waiting for the connection to my department. I want you to head up the new office, she continued, watching my reaction carefully. Build out the team, establish our presence, bring your healthcare security solutions to a new market. The offer stunned me. Me? I'm still finishing my degree. I've only been running this department for 8 months. And in those 8 months, you've exceeded every metric we set. Your team respects you, clients trust you, and you have the perfect blend of technical knowledge and business acumen. She leaned forward. This is a significant promotion, Allison. VP of West Coast Operations. The compensation package reflects that. My mind raced. San Francisco. 3,000 miles from Boston, from MIT, from the tentative family reconciliation I'd been building. From Ryan. I'd need time to think about it, I said finally. Elizabeth nodded, unsurprised. Take a week. The relocation wouldn't happen for 3 months, which gives you time to finish this semester at MIT. We can work out arrangements for completing your degree remotely or at Stanford, or Berkeley if you prefer. After she left, I sat motionless, staring out my office window at the Boston skyline I'd grown to love. This opportunity was everything I'd worked for. Recognition, advancement, the chance to build something substantial with proper resources and support. The kind of opportunity that had been denied to me 3 years ago when my college fund was redistributed. That evening, I called Ryan and asked him to meet me for dinner. We'd been dating for over a year now, our relationship growing deeper and more significant with each passing month. He'd become not just my partner but my confidant, the person who understood both who I was and how I'd gotten here. San Francisco? He repeated after I shared Elizabeth's offer. That's... wow. I know. It's sudden. He twirled pasta around his fork, considering. It's also an incredible opportunity. VP at your age? That's practically unheard of. But it means leaving. Everything. Everyone. I watched his face carefully. You? Ryan set down his fork and reached for my hand. Allison, I would never ask you to turn down something like this for me. That's not how this works. So you think I should take it? I think you should make the decision based on what's best for you. Not for us, not for your family, not for anyone else. He squeezed my hand. That said, San Francisco's a pretty great city. Lots of tech opportunities there. The implication hung between us. You'd consider moving? I'd consider a lot of things for the right person. His smile was warm but measured. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. You haven't even decided if you're taking the offer yet. The next day, I called Mason to meet for our regular coffee. First thigh. The past months, our weekly ritual had evolved from cautious reconciliation to something approaching normal sibling interaction. He was 6 weeks into his new job at MedTech Solutions and thriving in a way I'd never seen before. Challenged, engaged, building tangible skills rather than chasing entrepreneurial mirages. San Francisco? He echoed Ryan's response when I told him about the offer. That's major, Allie. It would mean leaving MIT. Again. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, but under completely different circumstances this time, he pointed out. Your choice, your terms, for an amazing opportunity you've earned. I stirred my coffee absently. It would also mean leaving just when things are stabilizing. With us. With Mom and Dad. Mason studied me across the table. Are you worried about us falling back into old patterns if you're not here? Is that it? His perception caught me off guard. Maybe, partly. I'm not going to revert to old Mason just because you move across the country. He said it lightly, but I could hear the undertone of hurt. Give me some credit. It's not that, I said quickly. It's more than that. We've all made progress. I don't want to disrupt it. Progress isn't that fragile, Allie. And if it is, then it wasn't real in the first place. He leaned back in his chair. Besides, they have airplanes in San Francisco. And Zoom. And phones. I laughed despite myself. True. The real question is whether you want this opportunity. Forget about everyone else for a minute. What does Allison want? It was such a simple question, yet so complex. What did I want? For so long, my decisions had been reactive, responding to what had been taken from me, fighting to rebuild, proving myself in the face of doubt and dismissal. I'd barely stopped to consider what path I would choose if all options were truly open. I think I do want it, I admitted finally. It's scary and overwhelming, but also exciting. A chance to build something significant, something that's fully mine from the ground up. Mason nodded. Then you should take it. The rest will work itself out. Later that week, I scheduled a call with my parents to share the news. My mother's immediate response was concern about my degree. You're so close to finishing, Allie. Would you have to start over somewhere else? No, I can transfer credits. And Elizabeth says the company will support me finishing at Stanford or Berkeley if I prefer. Stanford, my father mused, and I could hear the shift in his tone. The prestige of that name registered with him in a way that my accomplishments at Helix sometimes didn't. That's quite impressive. VP position in Stanford. I haven't decided for sure yet, I cautioned. It's a big move. Of course you should take it, my father said firmly. Opportunities like this don't come along every day. You've earned it. There was an unfamiliar note in his voice. Pride, yes, but something else too. Respect, perhaps. Coming from him, it meant more than I wanted to admit. Thanks, Dad, I said simply. Will Ryan go with you? My mother asked, always attuned to the personal side of things. We're talking about it. It's still early. After the call, I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open to a spreadsheet I'd created analyzing every aspect of the decision. Salary comparison adjusted for cost of living, career growth projections, education options, personal factors. The cold logic of numbers and pros and cons. Yet something was missing from this analysis. I closed the laptop and walked to my small balcony, gazing out at the Boston evening. 3 years ago, I'd left Lancaster with nothing but a car full of possessions and a wounded heart, determined to build something from the ashes of my original plans. Now I was considering another leap, but from a position of strength rather than desperation. The next morning, I informed Elizabeth of my decision. I'll take the position, I said, with one condition. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Which is? I want to bring 2 people from my current team with me, Jenny Park and Devin Williams. They're the best developers we have, and they've both expressed interest in relocation previously. Elizabeth smiled. Already thinking like a VP, I was going to suggest you bring at least 3 key people. She extended her hand. Congratulations, Allison. You'll do remarkable things in San Francisco. The following weeks were a whirlwind of planning, finding an apartment in San Francisco's competitive market, coordinating the transfer of my MIT credits to Berkeley where I'd complete my degree, and navigating the complex emotions of preparing to leave the city that had become my sanctuary. Ryan and I had difficult conversations about our future. His software development firm had clients in San Francisco and was open to him working remotely, splitting time between coasts for the first 6 months to see if a permanent move made sense. It's not ideal, he admitted one night as we packed books into boxes. But neither is ending something that matters this much over geography. His willingness to try meant everything. We were both pragmatic enough to know the challenges ahead, but committed enough to face them together. Mason took the news of my departure with a mix of genuine support and subtle anxiety, though he maintained that his progress wouldn't backslide. In my absence, I sensed his concern that he might lose his strongest ally in reshaping our family's dynamics. You'll have to come visit, I told him during one of our final coffee meetings. Silicon Valley would blow your mind. Definitely. He hesitated, then added, I've been thinking about taking some advanced courses, maybe working toward a computer science degree part-time. That's a great idea. Berkeley has excellent online programs if you decide to go that route. He nodded, then reached into his pocket and slid an envelope across the table, a familiar gesture in our reconciliation journey. Another installment. Inside was a check for $7,000, his largest repayment yet. Mason, this is too much at once. You're still getting established in your career. I got a performance bonus, he explained. First one ever. Thought it should go toward what I owe you. The symbolism wasn't lost on me, his first professional achievement being channeled into making amends rather than self-indulgence. It represented everything that had changed in him over the past year. I'm proud of you, I said, and meant it. Completely. My last week in Boston was emotional. My team at Helix organized a farewell party. My classmates at MIT signed a card promising to see me at graduation, regardless of which university issued my diploma. Ryan helped me pack up my apartment, each box representing another piece of the life I'd built being prepared for transplanting across the country. The night before my flight, we sat among the boxes with takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant. Having second thoughts, Ryan asked, noticing my pensive mood. Not about the move, I clarified. More reflecting on everything. How I got here, where I'm going. He nodded, understanding. Full circle in some ways, different from others. When my parents took my college fund, I thought my future was over. That I'd lost my one chance at the life I wanted. I shook my head at the memory. I couldn't see that there were other paths, harder ones maybe, but possibly better in the pie. And you built something real from scratch, Ryan said. No safety nets, no family connections, just pure grit and talent. And some lucky breaks, I added, thinking of Elizabeth spotting my potential that day in the repair shop. The right people believe in me at the right time. That's not luck. That's you being someone worth believing in. The morning of my departure arrived with crystalline clarity. My grandparents had driven up from Delaware to see me off, insisting on taking me to the airport despite my protestations that an Uber would be fine. We missed seeing you off to college the first time, my grandmother said firmly. We're not missing this. At the terminal, my grandfather hugged me with surprising strength. You did it your way, he whispered. Prove everyone wrong. That's the Carter spirit, the real one. My grandmother pressed something into my hand, a small box containing her own college pin from the 1960s. For new beginnings, she said. Ryan was the last to say goodbye, our farewell bittersweet with the promise of his visit in 2 weeks, tempering the uncertainty of our bi-coastal experiment. Ready to conquer California? He asked, holding me close. As ready as I'll ever be. As the plane lifted off, I watched Boston recede beneath me. The winding Charles River, the distinctive MIT dome, the Helix building where I'd found my professional footing. I wasn't leaving empty-handed this time, but carrying with me everything I'd built and learned, everything I'd become. My first week in San Francisco passed in a blur of corporate housing, office setup, meetings with real estate agents, and getting to know the small advance team already in place. The energy of the city was different from Boston, more frenetic, more future-focused, with an optimism that permeated even the most mundane interactions. I found an apartment in Nob Hill with breathtaking views of the bay and set about making it home, a process that felt less daunting the second time around. Jenny and Devin arrived the following week, excited to help build our West Coast presence from the ground up. One evening, as I unpacked books in my new living room, my phone rang with my mother's number. Just checking in, she said. How's the new place? Still coming together, but it already feels right, I told her. The office space is incredible, all windows and light, and everyone's been welcoming. That's wonderful, honey, she paused. Your father and I have been talking. We're considering a trip out there in the fall, if you'd be open to it. 3 years ago, they hadn't been willing to drive 2 hours to see me off to MIT. Now they were contemplating a cross-country journey to see the life I'd built for myself. "I'd like that," I said, surprised by how much I meant it. After we hung up, I walked to my new balcony and looked out at the San Francisco skyline, the famous fog rolling in across the Golden Gate Bridge. So different from Boston, which had been so different from Lancaster. Each place had shaped me, taught me something essential about who I was and what I was capable of. My phone pinged with a text from Mason. "First day surviving without your superior wisdom. Somehow managing. Miss you, though." I smiled and typed back, "Proud of you. Keep it up. Visit soon." Another ping, this time from Ryan. "Apartment seems empty without your books everywhere. 2 weeks can't come fast enough." And finally, an email from Elizabeth. "Team already singing your praises. Knew you were the right choice. Remember, build it your way. Build it your way." The phrase echoed my grandfather's words at the airport. Perhaps that had always been the lesson waiting to be learned. Not that plans can't be derailed or dreams deferred, but that the path to building something meaningful rarely follows our original blueprint. 3 years ago, my parents had taken my college fund and given it to my brother, calling it a better investment. The irony wasn't lost on me that in some twisted way, they'd been right, though not for the reasons they thought. That painful betrayal had forced me onto a path of self-reliance and determination I might never have found otherwise. As the lights of San Francisco twinkled to life around me, I realized I wouldn't change what happened even if I could. The detour had become the destination, and it had led me exactly where I needed to be, not despite the obstacles, but because of them. Some investments pay off in ways no one could possibly predict, and sometimes the greatest return comes from the very thing you thought had been lost forever, your belief in your own power to shape your future, regardless of where you start, or who stands in your way. San Francisco's summer fog gave way to a brilliant fall. 6 months into my role as VP of West Coast Operations, Helix's San Francisco office had grown from a tentative outpost to a thriving hub of innovation. I'd assembled a team of 35 talented developers, designers, and project managers, some relocated from Boston, others hired locally from the rich talent pool of Silicon Valley. Our first major project, a secure communications platform for rural healthcare providers, had launched to enthusiastic client reviews. Elizabeth had flown in for the launch party, pulling me aside as the celebration wound down. "You've exceeded every expectation," she said, clinking her champagne glass against mine. "The board is impressed. I'm impressed." "It's been a team effort." I demurred. She shook her head. "Don't minimize your achievement, Allison. You built this from nothing. Own it." "Still learning to do that," I admitted. "Well, learn faster," she said with a wry smile. "Because we're considering something big for you." Before I could press for details, she was pulled away by a board member. The cryptic comment lingered in my mind as I returned to mingling with my team, accepting their congratulations with the growing confidence of someone who was finally learning to acknowledge her own worth. The bi-coastal relationship with Ryan had proven more challenging than either of us anticipated. His firm had been supportive of remote work initially, but as months passed, the strain of time zone differences and missed connections began to show. His planned 2-week visits often shortened to long weekends due to client emergencies, and my own intense schedule left little flexibility for East Coast trips. During his October visit, our first in nearly 6 weeks, we sat on the deck of my Nob Hill apartment, the Golden Gate Bridge visible through wisps of evening fog. "I've been offered a position here," he said, watching my face carefully. "Senior developer at Artemis Technologies." My heart leapt. "Ryan? That's fantastic. When did this happen?" "They approached me last month. I wanted to be sure it was right." Before mentioning it, he took my hand. "It's a good offer. Comparable to what I'm making now, but with better growth potential." "And you'd be here, No more red-eye flights and time zone calculations. I'd be here, he agreed, a tentative smile forming. If that's what you want. I pulled him close. It's exactly what I want. The relief of knowing our relationship wouldn't be indefinitely stretched across 3,000 miles lifted a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged. With Ryan relocating, San Francisco began to feel less like a career stepping stone and more like a place I could truly build a life. The fall semester at Berkeley was in full swing, and I'd found an unexpected joy in being a student again. The campus had a different energy from MIT, more relaxed, less intensely competitive, but with a creative vibrancy that suited my current phase of life. With just 2 semesters remaining before completing my bachelor's degree, I'd begun considering continuing directly into a master's program. One crisp November morning, I received an unexpected call from Mason. Guess who got accepted to Stanford's online computer science program? He announced without preamble. No way! Mason, that's incredible! Part-time, starting spring semester. I'll still keep my job at MedTech, but this feels like the right next step. His voice held a quiet pride I'd rarely heard from him. Not the boastful overconfidence of his entrepreneurial days, but genuine satisfaction in an achievement earned through merit and hard work. I'm so proud of you, I said, meaning every word. Stanford's program is extremely competitive. Well, I had this sister who kept pushing me to actually learn fundamentals instead of just talking big. Her advice paid off. We chatted about his classes, his continuing progress at MedTech, and the small but steady payments he continued to send toward the college fund debt. The latest check had arrived last week, bringing his total repayment to just over $30,000. At this rate, it would take years to repay the full amount, but the consistency of his effort mattered more than the speed. Actually, he said toward the end of our call, there's something else I wanted to run by you. Remember Jeremy from the repair shop back in Lancaster? Jeremy had been a fellow technician at the shop where I'd worked during high school. Quiet, methodical, with an intuitive understanding of hardware that balanced my software focus. Of course, what about him? He reached out to me on LinkedIn. Apparently, he's built quite a reputation fixing complex networking issues for small businesses in the Lancaster area. He's considering moving to a larger market, and I mentioned there might be opportunities in Boston. You're helping recruit for Boston now? I teased. Just connecting people who might benefit from knowing each other. He's got real skills, Allie. No formal education, like you initially, but tremendous practical knowledge. Send me his information, I said. I'll pass it along to the Boston office. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen island, smiling to myself. A year ago, Mason had been desperately trying to fake his way into a tech job with an inflated resume and imaginary skills. Now he was confidently networking, recognizing genuine talent in others, building authentic professional relationships. The transformation still amazed me. Later that week, I received a formal email from Elizabeth requesting a video call. Her serious tone sparked both curiosity and slight apprehension. I mentioned at the launch party that the board was considering something significant, she began once our call connected. I can now share the details. We're planning a major expansion into the European market, starting with offices in London and Berlin. I nodded, waiting for the connection to my role. The board wants you to head the European division as Executive Vice President of International Operations. Based in London initially, with regular travel to Berlin as we establish both offices. The offer stunned me into momentary silence. Executive VP, International Operations, at 26? That's a tremendous opportunity, I finally managed. It's also a tremendous challenge, Elizabeth cautioned. You'd be building from scratch again, but with greater cultural and regulatory complexities. The compensation reflects that, of course. My mind raced with implications. Another move, this time international. Just as Ryan was relocating to San Francisco. Just as I was settling into my Berkeley program. just as things with my family were finding a new equilibrium. I understand this requires careful consideration, Elizabeth continued, noting my expression. Particularly given your personal circumstances. Take 2 weeks to think it through. The board needs an answer by December 1st. After the call, I walked to the window of my office, gazing out at the San Francisco skyline that had become familiar in such a short time. The career trajectory Elizabeth was outlining was extraordinary by any standard. From community college, student to executive VP of a multinational tech company in just 4 years. Yet I felt surprisingly ambivalent. This latest opportunity would require sacrifices I wasn't sure I wanted to make. My relationship with Ryan, my education at Berkeley, the stability I'd finally begun to establish. Was continued advancement worth upending everything yet again? I called Ryan that evening, explaining Elizabeth's offer as we walked along the Embarcadero, the Bay Bridge illuminated against the night sky. London, he repeated, processing this information. Wow. I know. It's sooner than we expected to face another geographic challenge. He was quiet for several steps. What does your gut tell you? I considered the question. That I need to think beyond just career advancement this time, to consider what success really means to me in a broader sense. And what does it mean to you? I'm still figuring that out. I squeezed his hand. But I know it includes more than just an impressive title and salary. The following weekend, my parents flew out for their promised visit, their first time seeing my San Francisco life. I gave them a tour of my apartment and office, introduced them to key team members, and showed them around the Berkeley campus. My father, to my surprise, asked thoughtful questions about the technical aspects of our healthcare security platform. My mother took endless photos, proudly showing them to anyone willing to look, from waiters to Uber drivers. We haven't seen your father this happy in years, she confided as we prepared dinner in my kitchen on their final evening. Seeing you in your element, the respect your team has for you, it's helped him understand what you've built. I nodded, slicing vegetables for the salad. And what about you? What do you see? She paused, choosing her words carefully. I see that we were wrong, Allie. About so many things. About what success looks like. About the paths that lead there. She met my eyes directly. About which of our children truly had the business gene your father was so fixated on. The acknowledgement, so long in coming, felt like the closing of an old wound. Not erasing the scar, but allowing it to finally heal. Cleanly, over dinner, I shared Elizabeth's London offer, watching their reactions. "London!" my mother exclaimed. "That's incredible, honey." My father's response was more measured. "Executive VP of International Operations, at your age." He shook his head, but with admiration rather than doubt. "Extraordinary." "I haven't decided." "Yet," I cautioned. "There are complications." "Ryan," my mother nodded understandingly, "and my degree, and the team I've just built here, and—" I hesitated. "And the question of what I actually want at this point." "What do you mean?" my father asked, genuinely curious. "I've been climbing so fast, taking every opportunity for advancement, partly because I felt I had to prove myself after what happened with the college fund." I looked at both of them directly. But now I'm wondering if I should take a breath. Build depth instead of just height in my career. Finish my education without rushing. Maybe even start thinking about personal milestones, not just professional ones. My father considered this, twirling his wine glass thoughtfully. "You know, when I was building the hardware stores, I had an opportunity to expand regionally much faster than I did. Your grandfather advised me to grow at a pace I could sustain with excellence rather than just accumulating locations." "You never told me that?" I said, surprised. Because for years I regretted not expanding faster. Thought I'd missed my chance. He smiled ruefully. It took losing 3 stores during Mason's startup fiasco to realize Dad was right all along. Quality matters more than quantity. Sustainability matters more than speed. It was perhaps the most valuable business advice he'd ever shared with me, and it aligned perfectly with my own emerging instincts about the London opportunity. The day after my parents left, I arranged a video call with my grandparents to discuss the decision facing me. My grandmother, always the practical one, asked penetrating questions about the role's demands and benefits. My grandfather listened quietly until she'd finished her interrogation. "You've proven yourself 10 times over. Allison," he said finally. "The question now isn't what you have to prove to others, but what path will bring you the most satisfaction." "That's what I'm trying to figure out," I admitted. "Well, let me ask you this," he continued. 20 years from now, what will you wish you had prioritized during this phase of your life?" It was exactly the right question. That night, I made a list of what truly mattered to me at this juncture. Not what would impress others or advance my career fastest, but what would create the life I genuinely wanted. Complete my education properly, without shortcuts build a relationship. With Ryan based on stability, not constant disruption. Establish roots somewhere long enough to create community, continue healing family relationships, develop depth of expertise, not just breadth of responsibility, create work that makes a meaningful difference. The next morning, I requested a video call with Elizabeth. Her expression told me she'd already guessed my decision before I spoke. "You're declining London," she stated. "Yes," I confirmed. "It's an incredible opportunity, and I'm honored to be considered. But the timing isn't right for me personally or professionally." She nodded slowly. "I suspected as much. May I ask your reasoning?" I explained my thought process, the value of completing my education without interruption, the importance of building stability in my personal life, and my desire to fully develop the San Francisco office before taking on another major challenge. I believe I can create more value for Helix by deepening our West Coast presence than by dividing my focus across continents right now, I concluded. Elizabeth studied me with that assessing gaze I'd come to respect. "You know, Allison, when I first met you in that repair shop, what impressed me wasn't just your technical skill. It was your clarity about what mattered to you. You've maintained that clarity despite extraordinary success at a very young age. That's rare. Thank you for understanding. The London opportunity will go to someone else, but your future at Helix remains bright. Sometimes the most ambitious choice isn't taking every promotion offered." She smiled. "I turned down a CEO position at a startup 5 years ago to remain with Helix. Best decision I ever made." This revelation surprised me. Elizabeth had never shared much about her own career decisions. "Why did you stay?" I asked. "Because I valued building something lasting over having the top title. Because I'd carefully constructed a life that balanced professional achievement with personal fulfillment." Her expression softened slightly. "And because sometimes the most powerful position isn't the one with the fanciest title, but the one where you can do your best work with minimal friction." Her words resonated deeply, validating my decision in a way nothing else could have. That weekend, Ryan moved into my apartment, his East Coast life packed into a dozen boxes and a U-Haul trailer. As we unpacked his books and arranged them alongside mine on the built-in shelves, the symbolic merging of our lives felt right in a way that another international move never could have. "No regrets about London?" he asked as we collapsed onto the couch amid half-empty boxes. "None," I said honestly. For the first time, I made a decision based on what I want my life to be, not just my career. "And what do you want your life to be?" I considered the question, looking around at our newly shared space. Balanced, meaningful, connected to the people who matter most. I leaned against his shoulder, built on my terms, not in reaction to what was taken from me or what others expect. A week later, Mason called with news of his own. "I've been promoted," he announced, his tone balanced between pride and humility. "Senior developer at MedTech, youngest on the team." "That's fantastic. Well-deserved." "Thanks. It comes with a decent salary bump, too." He paused. "Which means I can increase the repayments. I'm committed to making this right, Allie, however long it takes." His consistent dedication to making amends continued to move me. "I know you are. I've never doubted that." "Actually, there's something else I wanted to run by you," he continued. "I've been developing a side project, a simplified electronic health record system for small medical practices. Nothing revolutionary, but focused on usability and affordability where the big systems fall short." The parallels to his Nexus Link concept weren't lost on me, but this time he was approaching it very differently, building it himself with skills he'd actually mastered, starting small, focusing on a specific need he understood through direct experience. "Sounds promising," I said cautiously. "I'm not quitting my job or asking for investment," he clarified quickly, reading my hesitation. "Just working on it evenings and weekends, building a proper prototype before even thinking about next steps." "That's a very mature approach. I learned from my mistakes, and from watching you build the right way." He hesitated. "But I would value your feedback on the user interface design if you're willing. No pressure." "I'd be happy to take a look," I said, genuinely meaning it. This new Mason, thoughtful, methodical, seeking feedback rather than validation, was someone whose projects I could support without reservation. As Christmas approached, Ryan and I settled into our shared life with surprising ease. We established routines and traditions, explored our new city together, and created a home that reflected both of us. The Berkeley spring semester registration confirmed my academic path. 3 more semesters to complete my bachelor's, then directly into the master's program with a focus on healthcare information security. One evening, as we walked hand in hand through the holiday lights at Fisherman's Wharf, Ryan stopped suddenly and turned to face me. "I've been thinking," he began. "Dangerous?" I teased. He smiled, but his expression remained earnest. "We've navigated a lot of changes together. Your move here, my move here, career shifts, family reconciliations, educational pursuits. It's been quite a journey," I agreed. "And through all of it, one thing has become increasingly clear to me." He reached into his pocket and dropped to one knee, a small box in his hand. "I want to navigate all future changes with you, officially, permanently." The ring inside was simple but beautiful, a single diamond set in platinum, elegant without being ostentatious. Like our relationship itself, it emphasized substance over show. "Allison Carter," he said, his voice steady despite the curious onlookers, gathering around us. "Will you marry me?" At that moment, all the pieces of my life seemed to align. Career, education, family, love, not perfect, still evolving, but fundamentally right in a way I'd once thought impossible. The path that had begun with betrayal and loss had led, through persistence and courage, to something far more valuable than what had been taken from me. "Yes," I said, without hesitation. "Absolutely, yes." As he slid the ring onto my finger, cheers erupted from the small crowd of holiday shoppers who had stopped to watch. Ryan stood and pulled me close, his embrace feeling like home in the truest sense of the word. That night, as we celebrated with champagne on our deck overlooking the twinkling city lights, I reflected on the strange, winding journey that had brought me here. 3 years ago, I'd watched my carefully planned future crumble when my parents redirected my college fund to my brother's doomed startup. Now I stood on the threshold of a future I couldn't have imagined then. Richer, more nuanced, built through my own efforts and choices. "First call tomorrow should be to your grandparents," Ryan suggested. "They'll be thrilled." I nodded, already imagining my grandmother's joyful reaction, my grandfather's gruff approval. "And Mason," I added. "He'll want to be part of this." "Your parents, too," Ryan said gently. They've come a long way. He was right. We all had. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through our bedroom window, I looked at the ring on my finger, tangible proof of a future being built on love and choice, rather than obligation or expectation. The journey from that devastating night in Lancaster to this sun-filled morning in San Francisco had been anything but direct. Yet every detour had ultimately led me exactly where I needed to be. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't getting what you think you want, but discovering what you truly need and having the courage to build it yourself, one determined step at a time. 5 years passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. Life in San Francisco had evolved from a new adventure to a comfortable reality. Ryan and I married in a small ceremony at a vineyard in Napa Valley, with my grandparents, parents, and Mason all in attendance. The family tensions that had once seemed insurmountable had softened into a new dynamic, not perfect, but honest in a way they'd never been before. Our wedding day had been a testament to how far we'd all come. My grandfather, now using a cane, but still sharp as ever, had walked me down the aisle. My grandmother had wept openly, whispering, "I always knew you'd find your way," as she embraced me. My parents had been present in a way they never had been during my childhood, fully engaged, genuinely supportive, without comparing me to Mason or measuring my choices against their expectations. And Mason himself had served as Ryan's best man, dosinai, suggestion that had come from Ryan, who'd grown to appreciate my brother's transformed character over countless Sunday dinners and weekend hiking trips. During his toast, Mason had abandoned his prepared speech and spoken from the heart. 7 years ago, I took something that wasn't mine to take, he'd said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. But Allison didn't just survive that loss, she thrived because of it. She showed me what real success looks like. Building something authentic from the ground up, through genuine skill and unwavering determination. My role at Helix continued to grow, though not in the ways Elizabeth had initially predicted. After declining the London position, I'd focused on developing our healthcare security division into an industry leader. Rather than expanding geographically, I'd chosen to deepen our expertise and innovation in a specific domain. The strategy had paid off. Our division now generated nearly 30% of Helix's overall revenue, with a reputation for excellence that attracted top talent and prestigious clients. Elizabeth had been promoted to CEO the previous year, and in a move that surprised the industry, she'd named me Chief Innovation Officer rather than filling her former role. "The company doesn't need another me," she'd explained. "It needs someone who sees possibilities others miss. That's always been your strength." On a warm spring afternoon, I walked across the Berkeley campus in cap and gown, finally receiving my master's degree in computer science with a specialization in healthcare information security. My thesis project had evolved into a patented security protocol that Helix had already implemented across our client networks. As I accepted my diploma, I spotted my family in the audience, Ryan beaming with pride, my grandparents dabbing at tears, my parents applauding enthusiastically. And beside them, Mason, who had flown in from Boston specifically for the ceremony. The path to this moment had been neither straight nor brief. I'd taken classes part-time while building my career, at Helix, sometimes taking just one course per semester when work demands peaked. The conventional timeline would have seen me graduate years earlier, but my journey had taught me to value thoroughness over speed, depth over credentials alone. My brother had undergone perhaps the most remarkable transformation of all. After completing Stanford's online program, he earned a promotion to lead developer at MedTech. The side project he'd mentioned years ago, the streamlined electronic health record system for small practices, had evolved into a successful product that MedTech had eventually acquired and brought to market. Mason hadn't become the overnight tech mogul our father had once envisioned, but he'd built something genuine and valuable through patience and expertise. Most significantly, the previous month he'd handed me a check that completed his repayment of the college fund. It had taken 6 years of consistent monthly payments, supplemented by portions of every bonus and raise he'd received. The final check had come with a simple note: "Debt paid in full. Thank you for believing change was possible." I'd deposited the check into an account I'd established specifically for these repayments. The total now stood at $87,000, exactly matching the original college fund. What to do with it had been a question I'd pondered for years. Now, with the final payment received, I finally had an answer. After the graduation ceremony, we gathered at my favorite restaurant overlooking the bay. My father raised his glass in a toast to Allison, who taught us all that success isn't measured by how quickly you climb, but by the strength of the foundation you build. The words struck me deeply, coming from the man who had once valued entrepreneurial flash-over methodical skill building. My mother squeezed his hand, her eyes reflecting shared recognition of how much their perspectives had evolved. My father had mellowed in recent years, especially after a minor heart attack that had finally forced him to slow down and reevaluate his priorities. He'd sold his remaining hardware stores to a former employee, maintaining a consultative role that allowed him to share his business wisdom without the stress of daily operations. The change had transformed him, softening the hard edges of ambition that had dominated his personality for decades. "I have an announcement," I said after the toasts subsided. All eyes turned to me expectantly. "As you know, Mason recently completed repaying the original college fund amount." Mason nodded, a complex mix of emotions crossing his face: pride in having fulfilled his commitment, lingering regret over the necessity of it. "I've decided what to do with those funds," I continued. "I'm establishing the Lancaster Future Fund, a scholarship program for students from our hometown who show promise in technology fields but lack financial resources." The surprise on everyone's faces quickly gave way to approval. My mother's eyes welled with tears. My father nodded slowly, understanding the significance of transforming our family's painful chapter into something constructive for others. "Key, first recipient has already been selected," I added. "Jeremy's daughter Katie, the same Jeremy who worked with me at the repair shop. She's been accepted to Carnegie Mellon's computer science program but was struggling to afford it." "Perfect," my grandfather said gruffly, raising his glass again. Turning full circle. Later that evening, as Ryan and I walked along the waterfront, I reflected on the strange circular journey that had brought me here. If I could go back and tell my 18-year-old self what would happen after losing that college fund, I'm not sure she'd believe me, I mused. "What would you tell her?" Ryan asked. "That the detour would become the destination, that losing what I thought I needed would lead me to discover what I actually wanted." I threaded my fingers through his. "That the hardest moments would be catalysts for the best ones." The summer brought another milestone: the launch of the Carter Foundation for Education Equity, a separate and larger initiative funded by a significant portion of my Helix stock options that had vested. While the Lancaster Future Fund would focus specifically on students from my hometown, the foundation would have a broader mission, providing scholarships and mentorship for students nationwide who faced unexpected obstacles to their education. The Foundation's headquarters occupied a renovated Victorian in the Mission District, with a small but passionate staff dedicated to identifying promising students who needed not just financial support, but guidance navigating unconventional educational paths. "It's a powerful legacy," my grandmother said when I explained the foundation's expanded mission, "using what happened to you to create opportunities for others." At the foundation's inaugural event, I shared my story publicly for the first time. How losing my college fund had forced me to find unconventional paths to education and career advancement, and how those detours had ultimately shaped me into someone stronger and more resourceful than I might otherwise have become. But not everyone finds their way through such obstacles, I concluded. The Carter Foundation exists to provide both financial support and mentorship to talented students facing similar challenges. Not to remove all obstacles, because some challenges build essential character, but to ensure that financial barriers alone don't prevent deserving students from reaching their potential. Mason had flown in for the event and approached me afterward with an unexpected proposal. "I'd like to contribute to the foundation," he said. "Not just a donation, but ongoing support, maybe a percentage of my annual income." His offer moved me deeply. "You don't have to do that, Mason. You've already repaid the original debt." "This isn't about debt anymore," he said seriously. "It's about purpose. What happened between us, the college fund, everything that followed, it changed both our lives. Now we have a chance to transform that experience into something that helps others." We established a joint contribution structure that allowed him to become a meaningful partner in the foundation while maintaining his own financial stability. It felt like the final piece of our reconciliation falling into place, not just repairing the past, but building something new and meaningful together. Within a year, the foundation had awarded 15 scholarships and established mentorship programs at 3 universities. Mason took particular interest in mentoring young developers who, like him, had taken unconventional paths or needed to rebuild after early setbacks. His vulnerability about his own mistakes made him uniquely effective with students who felt pressured to present themselves as flawless to succeed. That fall, Ryan and I bought our first house, a Victorian in Pacific Heights with enough room for the family we hoped to start in the coming year. As we moved in, creating a home that represented our shared future, I found myself reflecting on the question my grandfather had posed years earlier. What would I wish I had prioritized 20 years from now? The answer has shaped every major decision since, choosing depth over constant advancement, stability over geographic expansion, meaningful work over prestigious titles, and family healing over harbored resentment. Each choice had led me further, from the rigid plan I'd once clung to and closer to a life built on authentic priorities and genuine fulfillment. 2 months after moving in, I discovered I was pregnant. The timing felt perfect. Our careers established, our home settled, our family relationships healed. When we shared the news at Thanksgiving, my mother burst into tears of joy, and my father embraced Ryan with uncharacteristic emotion. Mason's reaction was equally touching. He took me aside later that evening, his expression serious. "I want to establish a college fund for the baby," he said. "A proper one, in a trust that can't be touched for any other purpose." The symmetry of his offer, his desire to ensure that my child would never face the uncertainty that had altered my own path, brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you," I said simply, knowing that no further words were needed between us. On our first night in the new house, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, Ryan and I had sat on our back deck watching the sunset over the Golden Gate Bridge. "Happy?" he had asked simply. I considered the full weight of that question, all it encompassed, all it meant. "Deeply," I had answered, and meant it completely. That sense of contentment only deepened as our family grew. Our daughter Elaine, named after my grandmother, was born the following summer, a perfect blend of Ryan's easy temperament and my determination. Watching her explore the world with fearless curiosity reminded me daily of life's unexpected gifts. My parents embraced grandparenthood with an enthusiasm that sometimes surprised me. My father, in particular, seemed transformed by Elaine's arrival, patient, present, attuned to her needs in ways he had rarely been with his own children. "Second chances," my mother explained simply when I commented on the change. The night after Elaine's first birthday celebration, I received a text from Elizabeth with news that bookended my journey in a way that felt almost poetic. Helix was establishing a scholarship program at MIT for women in technology, and they wanted to name it after me. The Allison Carter Scholarship for Women in Tech. I read aloud to Ryan as we sat on the nursery floor, watching Elaine stack blocks with intense concentration. For students who demonstrate exceptional potential despite challenging circumstances. "Perfect," he said. Your story coming full circle. The following spring, I had the honor of meeting the first recipient of the MIT scholarship, a brilliant young woman named Zoe who had overcome homelessness to pursue her education. Showing her around the campus I had once been prevented from attending, I felt no lingering resentment, only gratitude for the complex path that had led me here. The traditional route isn't always the best one, I told her as we sat on a bench overlooking the Charles River. Sometimes the detours teach you more than the destination ever could. As I drove home from the airport after that visit, I thought about the young woman who had driven away from Lancaster 7 years ago, her future seemingly in tatters, unaware that she was actually driving toward a life more fulfilling than the one that had been taken from her. The journey had contained moments of profound doubt, bitter disappointment, and painful reckoning. But each challenge had shaped me. Each detour had taught me. Each obstacle had strengthened me in ways I couldn't have imagined during those dark early days. My parents' decision to give my college fund to my brother's startup had been called a better investment at the time. The irony wasn't lost on me that in some cosmic way they'd been right, though not for the reasons they'd thought. That painful betrayal had set in motion a chain of events that forced me to discover my own resilience, forge my own path, and ultimately build a life richer and more purposeful than the one I'd originally planned. Some investments pay dividends in ways no one could possibly predict. And sometimes, the greatest return comes from learning that your worth was never determined by what was given to you or taken from you, but by what you chose to build for yourself, one determined step at a time. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.